Okay, so here we are. Stave 3, he awakes. He obviously has been sleeping pretty heavily. He doesn't want to be taken by surprise, as it's put here in the very beginning of Stave 3. So he's trying to expect the next ghost, which is kind of like he's trying to really, before he really sees the meaning of it, he is wanting to already have a sense of what it's going to be. And obviously, as you see the way it unfolds, perhaps one of the things that we see is throughout the work, the meaning of time is always going to be kind of new. It's gonna give rise to a new evaluation. And therefore, Scrooge is surprised that nothing he could expect in order to prepare him for this encounter is going to actually be sufficient to keep him from being surprised. So it's almost like, regardless, you're going to be surprised. Right? So I think there's something about that in the way this is set up. It then clicks for him that maybe the ghost is already here. Maybe he doesn't need to come, but maybe he's already here, which goes back to this point that was made earlier, that before Scrooge realizes how is the ghost going to come, is the ghost going to come, it clicks to him, wait, he's already been here, right? He's just in the other room, which I think is significant specifically about the present, the ghost of Christmas present. It's like, it's always there, right? In one way, the ghost of the present's always there. At the same time, it's always coming and it's always leaving. This is the fascinating part about the present, is it somehow is always generating the past, and yet at the same time, it's always giving rise to a future. So the present is this interesting kind of figure. Which is kind of indicative of time and the present in time. Okay, and it's just easy to kind of take it for granted, and therefore when you take it for granted, you don't realize that it's there. You don't sort of even realize that you have a life as you're living your life if you take it for granted. And so this is why I think the very first thing that the ghost of Christmas present says in Stave 3, he calls him by name, right? He calls Scrooge by name. Scrooge comes in, and then you get this depiction of this feast, this incredible feast. This is Scrooge's house, and the house is this great abundant feast. Everything is just filled to excess, right? There's an abundance here, which I think is supposed to indicate that the present moment is just an abundance. It's a feast. It's where the feast of existence happens. Right, the feast of joy is in the present moment. And that's sort of being depicted by the great legs of, the joint meats. You can think of big like turkey legs or huge hams and turkeys. You got hot chestnuts, barrels of oysters, right? You got to kind of get English here. Right, you get all these, plum puddings and yada, yada, yada. Almost an excessive list. It's like, okay, Dickens, ease it up. We get the point. But I think the point is, you don't get the point unless I'm excessive, right? The point isn't, hey, there's a feast. The point is there's an excessive feast, over the top, so much so that you might think this is unnecessary. We don't need this much stuff. And I think that's again and again the point of what the ghost of Christmas present is trying to suggest, is that in the present, there's almost so much there that there's more than you even need, right? There's an abundance that goes beyond mere need, which is going to tie up again with the children at the end, ignorance of ones, as we'll see here in a second. Okay, so the ghost is there depicted as a glorious to see jolly giant with a glowing torch. Once again, the ghost of past had a light indicating illumination, insight. The ghost of present has a light, sort of depicting the same sort of thing. And I think it says it holds it up high to shed light on Scrooge. This is put on 44 of this edition, right? He held it up high up to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping around the door. Here's the first words that the ghost says, other than Scrooge. He says, "Come in." Everyone knows this if you've seen, any film. "Come in." You got to say like, come in and know me better, man." Right, like in that sort of voice. And so the idea is the ghost in present, is inviting Scrooge to come in and know me better. You're like, what the heck does he mean, know me better? I think the way Dickens is presenting this is like Scrooge knows nothing of this feast. Scrooge doesn't know anything of the present. He doesn't know anything of the abundance that the ghost of Christmas present gives, right? You go on to see this ghost gives a gift, a seasoning, right? The special Christmas seasoning. Sprinkles it on all the meals, all the people, and it takes all the sourness out of it. It takes all the darkness out of it. And Scrooge knows nothing of that. And so I think this is one of the things that the ghost is inviting Scrooge into, is this feast. He's the only one on Christmas that doesn't celebrate it, that doesn't feast. Right? He's the only one that's not capable of entering into that festivity of just existence, which once again, remember, this was the point of the incarnation, the point of Christmas, right? This recognition, the past and the future get all its meaning wrapped up into the feast of the very present moment, this one singular moment, which then is what makes all time have meaning. Scrooge is the only one that can't and doesn't see that or celebrate that. And so that's why I think this whole scene in Stave 3 is about Scrooge being invited into that, being able to see the feast that he's missing out on. Does that kind of make sense? It's before his eyes. It's actually not something that he kind of needs to prepare for. He needs to get a raise in order to get that, or he needs a promotion in order to be able to, feast on existence, have a great life. Sometimes people think the great feast and the great joy of life is going to come when I retire. That's a bunch of crap. That's not true, right? It's if it's not in the present moment, it's not going to be anywhere. So I think this is the thesis of Stave 3 is come in and know me better. Really understand the meaning of the present moment, and when you do, you'll see that it's a feast of complete excessive abundance beyond what you even need or could have hoped for. Okay, so I like that. This is a little just the description of the ghost is hilarious. I'm just going to read a little bit of this a little bit later here. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. Right, once again inviting him to know me better. Look upon me. Scrooge reverently did so, because at first he was hesitant. He didn't want to look at the ghost. Even though he knew the ghost was jolly, right? Wasn't something to be feared, he was still afraid to look at the ghost. So he reverently looks at the ghost, right? It was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle, right, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by an artifice. So it's like wearing this bathrobe, this green bathrobe with this white fur. Right? You can think about I don't know, like your uncle on Christmas morning, we're coming out and open presents in his bathrobe or something, and it's so loosely tied that he doesn't have a shirt on under it, and he's just having a great grand old time, right? Okay, so it's sort of he's wanting to present the feast to Scrooge, and it's he doesn't want to be covered up, although it's kind of quasi-scandalous here, but he doesn't want to be covered up by anything artificial. He doesn't want to conceal from the true meaning of what he is, right? So I think the looseness of this garment is supposed to indicate that. He was barefooted, right? He had free curls, which were as free as his cheery voice and his unconstrained demeanor. right? So basically a guy that was just, you think joy incarnate, and you think the ghost of Christmas present. Okay. You've never seen the like of me, exclaimed the spirit. And Scrooge says, no, I haven't. And he says, you've never walked forth with the younger members of my family, right? My elder brothers in these later years? You've never seen anyone like me before? And Scrooge is like, no, I haven't. Right, which is sort of this tragic realization that Scrooge has never really partaken, although you do get slight indications that he maybe sort of saw it back at Fezziwig's, right? Of course, anyone at Fezziwig's would have sort of saw it. But I think the point is like Scrooge doesn't see it with the clarity that he needs. He then, before they go on their little journey of the present, right? Before they leave this scene and they go out into the town, you get a comparison between the past and the present here. This is on the bottom of page 44. Spirit, said Scrooge submissively, conduct me where you will. So Scrooge is willing to be formed, Scrooge is like open to being saved. He wants to be saved in a sense. It's just almost like he doesn't know how to be saved. Like how do I be saved? Conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. So whatever the ghost of Christmas past taught Scrooge, showed Scrooge, that is working. The past is sort of operative in Scrooge's life, right? So he has this sort of willingness because he sees the past clearly. He's willing to go into the present because he fully understands the past. And he knows he needs to be shown something that he doesn't see. And I think that's the kind of what's fascinating about this. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it. And then the ghost says, touch my robe, and they do so, and then boom, they're out in the streets with the geese and the turkeys and the mistletoe and the meat, the pigs, the sausages, oysters, pies, puddings, fruit, punch, right? It goes on and on and on. And it's Christmas morning, right? This is the Christmas morning, which was like, the next morning. So this is the present morning that's like to come. And so they go walking around, right? And what's fascinating is as they go walking around, the ghost sees people that start like fighting a little bit, and he like gives a little like waft of his like little torch. A little bit. They don't need a whole lot. They just need a little bit of like sprinkle. And all of a sudden they come to this realization like, it's Christmas, man. We can fight tomorrow. Today, let's not fight. It's Christmas. And they're like, oh, okay, Merry Christmas. And then they like, can even start singing little songs here and there, and right. But what's awesome is that the Christmas morning is an incredibly joyful depiction, but the externals, right? Once again, this goes back to something we saw in Stave 1 with Scrooge, and the cold originates from the internal. And that's what makes the external what it is, whereas in his nephew, the warmth seems to be internal, and that's then what affects the external. And so here on Christmas morning, you get this great depiction of all of this like merriment, but then it ends on page 45 with this description of the external weather, right? There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet was there an air of cheerfulness abroad in the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain, right? So there's something about like this externally was not something that you would have said would be a cheerful environment, right? Bleak, cold, right? And yet, because of the internals of the people, it's almost as if it changes the environment. The environment gets changed because of the people there. And he goes on to talk about the people. For the people were doing this and that, and they were throwing snowballs, and if the snowballs hit the person they were throwing at, they laughed. And if the snowballs missed the people they were throwing at, what would they do? This is an interesting description. They would laugh if they hit the person, and if they threw the snowball and it like went way off and completely missed, they would, anyone pick this up? They would still laugh. They would laugh even like harder, right? It was like everything was just funny. Everything was not just like funny, but good, joyful. Everything was good. Okay, then you get this long description of the grocers and the fruits and this and that, and once again, there's a point to all this. This isn't just like he's trying to fill up a bunch of pages so his teacher will be happy that he hit the word count. He's trying to depict excessive abundance here, right? Okay, jumping ahead a bit to here's the description of the torch. Let's just read that out loud because that's important. 47. Okay, and it was a very uncommon kind of torch. This is at the top of page 47. For once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, presumably, I don't know if this is what the tradition was, but apparently, like, you could bring your food to someone and they'd cook it, and then you'd go pick it up and bring it home. Sort of like an early Uber Eats, but you got to like provide the ingredients yourself. I don't know. Okay, so once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers, people carrying their dinner home, who had jostled each other, bumped into each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly, for they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day. And so it was. God love it, so it was. Okay, and then Scrooge asked this question. Is there a peculiar flavor in which you sprinkle from your torch? Asked Scrooge. There is, my own. Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day? Asked Scrooge. So Scrooge is like, this seems to like make everything good. Make everything like taste better. Right? Taste better, it basically means like give you more joy, more pleasure. It gives you more gratitude. You become more thankful for the good of something. Right? Any kind of dinner, and then here's what the Spirit says. Super important line here. To any kindly given, to a poor one most. So the seasoning makes the poor meal taste better than any meal. It's like this is a seasoning that pairs good with poverty, right? Like when you take this seasoning and you pair it with poverty, oh man, what an incredible dish you get there. Okay, so really important theme that's happening here. Why to a poor one most? Asked Scrooge. Because it needs it most. Spirit, said Scrooge. Okay, then he goes on. We're going to talk about that quite yet. So it's this idea that in poverty, this ties up with stuff we saw in William James. This ties up with some stuff we also were talking about earlier in this class and first part of the Christmas Carol. In poverty, there's a need that is felt, and it's almost like the need. Think about back in the Republic, right, with luxury. Like if you live a luxurious life, it's going to be difficult to take a lot of enjoyment in the simplicities, right, in simpleness, because you're kind of raising the bar on what's going to count as you feeling fulfilled, feeling like you have what's needed, what's sufficient to generate happiness. So as luxury goes up, it seems that the ability to be thankful is going to or to be grateful is going to kind of go down. It's going to be more difficult to be grateful, it seems. And I think what he's suggesting, and this is what we're going to see at Bob Crachit's house, is that the feast, the most luxurious, I'll put luxurious in quotes right here, the most luxurious, the most abundant, the most excessive feast there is going to be the feast among the poor. Very, very fascinating thing. I'm not going to reflect on this explicitly, but it might be worth you just thinking about, the whole blessed are the poor in spirit, and sort of the meaning of why the blessedness is for the poor in spirit. What is it? Theirs is the kingdom. Is that what it is? Do they get the kingdom of heaven? I can't remember what the kingdom is. Let's say they get the kingdom of heaven. Right. The poor get the kingdom of heaven. Like why? Just chew on that in virtue of what the Christmas present is saying here. Okay, so I don't want to connect those dots for you. Just try to do that yourself on your own time as you're having your next snowball fight over Christmas. Okay, so the introduction of the feast is the most tasty when it's the feast of the poor, according to the Spirit.
I noticed that when it's talking about like in what you just mentioned earlier, it says at one point it says he sprinkles incense on their dinners from his torch, and then later it says he shed a few drops of water on them.
Yeah.
Is there a significance there?
I caught that too, and I sort of chewed on it for about 5 seconds, and then I was like, I don't know. That's a good observation though. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there is a significance to incense, right? I mean, there's something significant to that act of incensing something. And even the act of sprinkling water on something, right? I mean, both of these are forms of like blessing it or sanctifying it or something like that. So I think there's something about that, giving it a dignity. A purification, elevating it to something more than it is. I mean, so think about this. Here's like a little pause, just to reflect on a feast. You can have a meal. No, I don't want to say hey, have a meal. Let's start with you can have food. You can eat food with other people, right? Suppose you are just forced to sit at a table with a bunch of strangers. Because that's the only spot you can sit, and you're just eating food. I wouldn't say you are sharing a meal with them. You're not really sharing anything with them. They're just in your presence, and you're just sort of consuming food in their presence. They're consuming food in your presence. I think what's kind of being depicted here is there's something about a meal, this is certainly going to come up when we look at the Crachit home, and even when we get to the nephew's home. That this is certainly communal. It's almost like you can't have a meal by yourself. You just can't have a meal by yourself. You can't really feast by yourself, and so I think that there is something about the celebration that's happening here, specifically in the present, is a communal thing. It's something that is more than just, hey, let's make food because we all need to have food, and let's all just eat it, as if you were like each in your own like cubicle at a table. And I think what you're getting here is the depiction of this whole setting is not a bunch of people just consuming food because they need to eat. And it's better if the food tastes good. It's kind of like they're able to all get elevated to a point where that meal is something more than food. It has a significance, a spiritual significance more than just physical sustenance, right? So much so that maybe people look forward to Thanksgiving not merely because they love the taste of the stuffing and the turkey and the whatever. It's like there's something about the Thanksgiving meal. I know we're switching holidays, but Thanksgiving's closer, right? And maybe in our culture, Thanksgiving is sort of seen as more of a meal type of thing. Like your day sort of revolves around this, and you maybe kind of recognize, for at least some families, it's not just about eating food. It's about who's going to be coming, and it's going to maybe get dragged on, and obviously it's going to be around the food. But the food kind of provides this medium of a different type of good. The food provides a medium of not just material sustenance, but of like a spiritual good gets sort of presented through this. And I think maybe that's partly, I'm going like way out on the limbs here, of the incensing of these meals and these people and whatnot, is that it kind of makes these goods, these material goods, spiritual in a way. They become actually more than just food. It becomes something of a spiritual good. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to get heretical. It's never a good thing. But it's kind of like you have a priest that has bread, and it's like, oh, it's just bread. But there's this crazy thing that can happen in the context of the Catholic liturgy, that bread can become more than bread. And I think on a much lower level, not the level of perhaps a sacrament, but at like sacramentals. Maybe this is why we say prayers before we eat, that the eating isn't merely just physical, but somehow there's a spiritual good that can be had in the context of this meal. Right, just as like, eating whatever it is you eat in Mass, it's not merely like, hey, we're just taking in a couple extra calories here. It's like there's a significance, a spiritual significance, which is infinitely greater than the material goods that you're getting there. Likewise, there's a spiritual significance which is maybe infinitely greater than the material good that you get even in just a regular Thanksgiving meal with people. Right? I don't know. So that's sort of thinking a little bit out loud about some of that. So it's a good question though. So maybe that's partly why this spirit is this ghost is incensing the foods. Why the water? I don't know. It's great. Purification. I don't know. This is all good stuff though. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? We are at present. That's where we are. Okay. So. Let's jump to Bob Crachit's house. So you get to Bob Crachit's house, and the ghost, this is something someone mentioned earlier, the ghost is huge, a jolly giant, and yet the remarkable quality of this ghost was that, notwithstanding his gigantic size, could accommodate himself to any place with ease. So it's like this abundant ghost. Remember, the ghost is representing the abundance of the joy, the good that is in the present. And whatever size, right? Whether you're at like the little tiny, lighthouse, or whether you're, at the nephew's house, whether you're in the market square, wherever you are, it's like the ghost can accommodate itself to that space. It's sort of all things for all people. It has the ability to give the same feast in all those contexts. That's at least how I was kind of interpreting that. So here we are at Bob Crachit's house, right? And he's not a poor man, right? You get Mrs. Crachit. Every time I read this, I think of the Muppets Christmas Carol with Miss Piggy as Mrs. Crachit. And that voice is stuck in my head, but that's okay. Okay, so they're there. There's a lot of just beautiful details. We're not going to go through the details. The way that the daughter comes home, Martha, who apparently doesn't come home very often, so when she does come home, it's a really special thing because she has to work so much. She comes home. She wants to surprise the dad, Bob. Bob's at the church with Tiny Tim. Then they see Bob and Tiny Tim coming, and so Martha hides to surprise them, like, hey, this is going to be great, we'll surprise Dad. And this is, I don't know if you've ever been a kid and surprised your dad, or, you grow up and you be a parent and you get surprised when you come to your kids. You kind of know, but in this case, like, it's like a genuine surprise. And as Martha's looking on at Bob, her father, like when the mom says, oh yeah, she can't come home for Christmas. And he's getting really crushed by this. And it's just like too painful, even for the sake of a joke, to see him go through that she like jumps out prematurely before he really like hits bottom there, right? And it just kind of, I think, just shows Dickens is trying to like just show the tenderness of this family. Given the simplicity of their life, like the emptiness of the material emptiness of their life, there's still a richness to their existence that is far superior than anything Scrooge has experienced. So I think this is why Scrooge is able to see in this, is that he's able to see a wealth at the Crachit home that he lacks. Once again, Scrooge's problem is that he, at the very beginning, he thinks he knows what he needs. And as he goes back in the past and he goes in the present, he realizes he doesn't know what he needs. He's slowly starting to see there's something good that I don't have, which, once again, perhaps this is the significance of the poor, is that they know what they need. You know what you need. Right, and you know the value of being given things. You know the value of that. And I think the problem with Scrooge is he doesn't see that. He can't experience that. But being able to have this observation, he's like a fly on the wall at this feast. And tragically, he's not able to participate in it. So this is why it causes him pain. He's not actually there. He's not actually celebrating with them. He's just merely observing other people feast. He himself is not feasting, right? So this is why he's able to draw a lesson from this, and yet it doesn't actually save him. He's getting closer to the salvation he needs, but he's not quite there yet. Okay, and so there's some of the stuff I want to read because it's really good. Okay, so this is a little description of Tiny Tim. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Tiny Tim. And a lot of in the films and things, he's kind of depicted as like a really central character. Maybe he is sort of central, but I don't think as central sometimes as he's depicted in films. So at the bottom of page 49, after Bob and Tiny Tim come home, remember Tim's how does he put? He's crippled. He can't walk. He has a crutch. And the mom says, "Hey, how was Tiny Tim? How did he behave?" And then here's what Bob says: "As good as gold," said Bob, "and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." And so, I mean, here you have this depiction of this little boy who can't walk, and he's thinking how great it is that he's crippled. How great it is. He's grateful for being able to be crippled, grateful for being able to not be able to walk, for being sick, yada yada. And why is he grateful? Because when people look at him, they'll be reminded of he who made blind men see and cripples walk and what have you. And like the idea is, Tiny Tim is grateful that he can give other people joy just by the fact that he is the way he is, that he has the ability to bring joy and gratitude to other people, make other people grateful. That you kind of see that interesting kind of dynamic of him, rather than loathing and hating and like why am I such in a bad situation. He's actually grateful for his condition, which is sort of shocking. Okay, so here's a depiction of the feast and the goose. So we just got to get clear about this, because this is the paradigm of a poor man's feast, and the way that the Crachits respond to it is almost good enough to kind of bring tears to your eyes if you just sort of think about it and put yourself in their shoes. So this is on 50, right in the kind of the middle bottom of 50. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds. So they're like, oh, the goose, oh, we can smell the goose being cooked, and they come back with the goose, right? And the way that they were talking about this goose, this Christmas goose, you would have thought that this was like the rarest bird there was, right? A feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course, right? Like given how much they saw this as a as an unusual thing, right? They rarely get this, right? And so it was as if this was something of great worth in their eyes, right? And in truth, it was something very like it in that house, right? So the way that they treat goose might be the way that other people, I don't know, treat caviar or something. And apparently, goose or goose. That's like, what are we going to have tonight? Chicken, right? And at the Crachit house, that's like a great good there. Mrs. Crachit already had the gravy made. It was hissing on the saucepan. Master Peter was mashing potatoes with incredible vigor. Mrs. Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim over here to sit down. And the two little Crachits sat down, and on the next page, there was a breathless pause as Mrs. Crachit, looking slowly at the carving knives, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Crachits, started beating the tails and hurrah! And they're all excited by this little tiny goose. And they all start talking about the goose. Here's what's great. There never was such a goose, Bob said. He didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. This is the greatest goose in the world, right? And they're talking about this feast as if nothing that's happening in the world could surpass what's happening here. Its tenderness and flavor, size, and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration, right? You can just imagine how wonderful this is, and how little we had to, pay for this, even though that's not probably the truth there. For given how good it is, how much it cost, right? Okay, and so they're just having this excellent feast. You find out it's not actually that great of a feast because there is absolutely nothing left over. There aren't any leftovers except one small atom of a bone upon a dish. Right? They're like, oh, a good thing we didn't eat everything. Right? This was a lavish, full, excessive feast. We even have a little bit of a leftover. One atom of a bone left over, right? Right, and yet, from their perspective, this was more than enough. He goes on to talk about the pudding and yada yada yada. The pudding comes out. This will be the last little description of the feast, because once again, the point Dickens is making is the Crachits know how to feast because the Crachits know how to be thankful for whatever it is they have. Right? Scrooge doesn't know that lesson, and he's learning it, but he doesn't know how to be thankful for what he has. And so out comes the pudding, right? Everybody had something to say about the pudding, right? But nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family, right? So you can imagine, everyone's getting excited about the Christmas pudding coming out, and it's this tiny little dish, right? And you're only going to get a little tiny scoop of it. Everyone's talking about how great it looks, how great it smells, and yada, yada, yada. No one says, is that going to be enough? Right? That thought doesn't cross their mind at all. Are there going to be enough for seconds? That's not at all possible. Any Crachit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. Right? He also says, it would have been a flat heresy to do so. Okay, so it's all done. Then they're sitting around, they're talking, yada, yada, yada. Scrooge starts talking about Tiny Tim. Is he going to survive? Is he not? Scrooge is actually starting to see there's a goodness to this family. It's almost as if he wishes he could be a part of this. I think that's part of what's happening here. Is he sees what a feast is. He sees what a meal is, and he knows I lack that. I kind of want to be a part of that, but I don't have that. So he's being drawn into the present. Right, I erased it, but the come in and know me better. He's starting to know it, but he knows he's not a part of it, and he's slowly starting to want to become a part of that. Okay, so he's there. He's feeling very pained by the fact that the Ghost of Christmas Present says, if nothing changes, Tim is a dead man. Well, dead boy. Tim is going to die, right? He's going to die. He's not going to make it to the next Christmas. And Scrooge is pained by this. He falls down and he says, no. And then all of a sudden, Scrooge is jarred because he hears his name, right? And this is a real beautiful scene here, right? Scrooge here's his name, Mr. Scrooge. And Scrooge is like looking up. He's like, he wasn't expecting to hear that. Said Bob, "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast." This is in a lot of the film adaptations. Some of you kind of know this, but how it's described here is great. "My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day," because Mrs. Crachit says, "No, we are not toasting to Scrooge. Scrooge is a cold-hearted, fill in the blank with whatever unkind word you want to use." And then Bob says, "Not on Christmas Day. Come on, think of the children. This is not the day to hold back any toast from anyone, no matter how cold-hearted they are. It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure," she said, "on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge." It's almost like the only day anyone would ever think of toasting to Scrooge would be on Christmas, because that's the only day where there's like enough kindness, enough love, compassion, that someone would go that low to toast to Scrooge, right? And so Scrooge is like hearing this. "You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fellow." And then once again, Bob says, "My dear," was Bob's mild answer. "Christmas Day," right? Like, don't think ill of him. Don't talk ill of him. This is Christmas Day. This is not the day for that. And then Mrs. Crachit says, "I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt." And the irony of that is just so great, because there's Scrooge hearing this blessing, knowing this is not true.
I just had a realization that I thought
Yeah.
was interesting, was that, I mean, obviously Mr. Scrooge is a senile old man, but I find it interesting that the two people who seem to know him well,
Mm-hmm.
His nephew and Bob, are the only ones that are actually like pushing to be merciful for him.
Yeah. The only ones that are kind of close to him. Yeah, that's right. That's a really good observation. They're kind of close to him, and it's kind of like once you kind of get close to him, you don't have hatred for him. You more have, as it's kind of put later on by the nephew, you have pity. You kind of feel sorry for him. Like you don't want to kick him out in the cold. You actually want him to come in, and you just wish he would kind of warm up a bit so that he could. It's almost like he is his own worst enemy, as the nephew puts it later on. He's the one that's kind of causing himself his own pain and his oon loneliness. If he could just kind of warm up a bit and accept our invitation, he would have a great time, and we would probably have a great time with him too. So it's interesting that the two of them are the ones that know that do know him best. See, it's a tragedy. It's a tragic life, rather than like let's all sit around and talk about how stupid Scrooge is. That's a good observation. Okay. So, and then after the toast, this is great too, and I'm sure people have been in situations where something similar to this has happened. The children drank the toast. Right, this is after the toast to Scrooge. It was the first of their proceedings, which had no heartiness. So it was the very first thing of the day, which kind of was a downer, right? A little bit of a downer. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care twopence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for full 5 minutes. And after it had passed, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge, the baleful being done with. And so it's kind of like it's almost like wherever Scrooge goes, because of who he is at present, now there's this question, is there going to be a conversion? But at present, wherever he goes, he just sours it. He darkens it. He takes a great feast and he makes it a lousy feast, right? All the joy is kind of brought low, and I think just that depiction is pretty powerful there. Okay, the last paragraph of the Crachit home, and then we'll jump ahead to some of these other things. But the last paragraph of the Crachit home, description, summarization of the whole scene here. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty, and Peter might have known, and very likely did, the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded and looked happier yet in the brightest sprinklings of the Spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. So you get this description, summarization of this family. There was nothing special about this family other than the fact that they, as it was put, they were happy and grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. They weren't regretting, wishing, hoping for something better, right? That's the thing about the Crachits, is like, they're not hoping for a bigger turkey or goose. They're not hoping for, a hotter, plum pudding or whatever. It's like whatever they have is exactly what they need in order to be happy. That's what's remarkable about the Crachit home, right? They're not looking for better clothes. They're not looking for better anything. And so as they're fading away, Scrooge is sort of getting this sense of that about them. And then he sort of has put his eye on Tiny Tim. Okay, and then they go wandering. They go wandering through all these different areas. And I'll just sort of give a brief summarization of what I think is going on here. It's like a survey of the poor, the lonely, the isolated, right? All these people go to the lowest depths, right? Go to the people that are like out in the middle of nowhere in the cold, right? And yet even there's a feast, right? Even there's the ghost of Christmas present is there. The only place, interestingly, that it seems that the ghost of Christmas present is absent from, although you don't see it directly, where's the only place the ghost of Christmas present is absent? Scrooge's house, right? And then part of that is because like Scrooge is obviously with him. There's a sort of irony here, but he's able to see this feast that he doesn't have. Let's go to the ship, because I want to talk about the ship, which is great. Here we are. This is on 57. They landed on a ship. They came to a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune. So here they are. It's Christmas. They're on a ship. It's dark. It's cold, and yet they're still humming a Christmas tune, or they had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day with homeward hopes belonging to it. So the idea is like everyone is like, celebrating. Everyone is. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him. So it's like the people that aren't present, I can remember them, and I know that they're remembering me, and in virtue of that, there's still like, a common feast that can be shared between the two. Okay, here we go. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. So it's like, what an incredible, solemn, lonely place to be on this ship, floating, in this unknown abyss, in the lonely darkness. Underneath this, there's a depth which is, completely unknown, which sort of as profound as death. It was a great surprise for Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear hearty laughter. So he's reflecting on this scenario, like everyone seems to be on this ship, floating alone, and then all of a sudden, he's sort of, you can imagine, like he has this vision of being on the ship, floating through the sea of time by himself alone, and then all of a sudden the sound of laughter comes to him, and then it kind of fades into, where does he end up now? Where does he find himself right from the ship? He's then right at the nephew's house. And I think part of what's going on is Dickens is sort of saying, hey, life is kind of like this scene of being on a ship. You're kind of on this ship, floating through the darkness, the unknown abyss, the secrets that are as profound as death. And yet, here's what it looks like. Here's what that scene can look like. It can look like, and then you jump to the nephew's house, right? So I think what he's trying to suggest is the journey of life isn't necessarily a lonely one. It's not that you have to, using the imagery, sail through life alone and in the dark. It's as if you can do that with other people, and therefore there can be joy in this. There's also pain, and he goes on to talk about at the end. There's a lot of pain that can be accompanied in all this, but he's there, and once again, the family is talking about him, and they all kind of hate him, except for the nephew who has pity for him. He says he feels sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him. I have tried. Right? The nephew tries to be angry. This is on 59. Who suffers by his ill wills? Himself always. Who's the one that, like when he says bah humbug, who's the one that really is harmed by that? Who really gets soured by that? Scrooge does, right? I mean, it's like he is his own cause of loneliness and isolation. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? And then they basically say, well, he misses out on a good dinner. I think that's the consequence. He misses out on a good feast, right? And then he basically says, no, what he misses out on is he loses some pleasant moments which could have done him no harm. Like he misses out on the joy of life. That's what Scrooge misses out on. He's basically saying, no, this is a waste of time. And which is like saying, the joy that one could find in life is a waste of time. And I think part of this idea is maybe that's the meaning of time, is to take joy and gratitude in existence, in maybe even the trivial things, like playing stupid games like children, right? Maybe that's revelatory of what it means to be happy. Right, and that's why they transition to that. One real quick thing, and then we'll talk about the two children for about 30 seconds. So they start playing music. The niece by marriage starts playing on the harp and starts playing a song. And Scrooge knows this song. You got to read between the lines here. Scrooge knows this song. Played among other tunes, a simple little air, right? A mere nothing. You might have learned whistle in 2 minutes, like a tiny little tune on this harp, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school. Who was that child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school? The sister. So Scrooge knows that his sister knew this song, and now his niece is playing it, right? So it's all coming together for Scrooge, right? And here's where it all comes together. Familiar to the child that fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past, right? So it came back to him. When this strain of music sounded, all the things that the ghost of Christmas past, had shown him came upon his mind. He softened more and more. So the past is all brought together here when he's hearing this play. He softened more and more and thought that if he could have listened to it often years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the sexton's spade and that buried Jacob Marley. So he's kind of thinking like, I could have been happy. I could have had joy in life if I would have just listened to that song that my sister used to love so much. All right, I mean, part of the idea is Scrooge is coming to this realization that what he had could have made him happy. Right? He didn't need to turn to what killed Jacob Marley, which was wealth and greed and this work world. He already had what he could have, that he needed to be happy. Okay, the two kids, I know you gotta go, but the two kids represent ignorance and want, which are caused by us. It's almost like we're the cause of our own ignorance. We're the cause of our own want. I think this is why these are our offspring. We're given everything that we need in order to perfectly fulfill want, to fulfill ignorance. We're the ones that generate this, right? And so I think this is an interesting thing to put in mind with the poor are the one who feast. Therefore, it seems that maybe it's riches that cause the ignorance and the want. Riches of the world or the passions or whatever you want to call it. So, all right, we can talk more about this next time. We'll see you on Tuesday.